Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing jmk07J in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Let's play. Let's play knight f3 in this game, mixing it up with the openings. I have a lot of success with knight f3 against lower-rated players. It's just a nice transpositional move. g6 is a pretty good reply, especially if black plays like King's Indian or Grunfeld. So I'll just play c4 against that. Play knight c3. Giving them the option of playing c5 and taking it into a symmetrical English if they want. Looks like he's going to keep it in King's Indian territory. Okay, I'll oblige him with the King's Indian. We'll play d4. So after knight f6 to e4, we're back into mainline King's Indian. Classical variation. Just going to check this player out. He castles. Peak rating of 2004. Or sorry, no peak rating. Not too many games. 2004 in the 5-minute category. Okay, so let's play bishop e2 is what I usually do. Yeah, let's do that. And if e5, I had a really nice blitz game win recently where I took on e5 and played the exchange variation, so I might have considered doing that. Instead, he plays knight c6. This is, I think, a slight inaccuracy in view of d5. And I usually get pretty comfortable positions out of this. Goes back to b8. Let's just castle. It's somewhat illogical, right? Like playing knight c6 and then going right back to d8 to b8, and then yeah, taking further time to develop the knight. But this is a line for black. Bishop e3 makes sense. Let's do that. He can chase us with knight g4, but it's no problem just to play bishop g5 thereafter. I've had some pretty good games with low-rated players recently, and they have not been one-sided. A lot of them I've been honestly like fighting for my life. I think it's just normal variance in the results. And as I said in my last video, players in the pool, the 15-minute pool on ICC, are not walkovers, even at like mid-rating levels like this. I mean, they're plenty good. There's some deflation in the 15-minute pool on ICC because there's not that many players with high ratings. Like I'm at 2374, and I'm currently the highest rated player that's active in this category. So that kind of tells you something, that even people at the mid-rating levels are pretty tough. So c5, I can take en passant if I want, but I don't see a real good reason for doing so. So we're going to have like a Benoni type position. I'm thinking about h3, just to put a stop to knight g4. Yeah, I'm going to play h3 and try to squeeze him. If he plays a6, I'll probably play a4 just to rule out any b5 advance, because that's one major pawn break that black likes to play for, b5. The other pawn break is e6, but that's going to be hard to engineer with the knight on d7, because if e6 right now, I could just play d takes e6, and my queen would be hitting the d6 pawn. Black would lose a pawn. So I'm wondering how he's going to unwind. Knight b6, that appears to be a little odd. It might allow him to play e6, but the knight is not on an optimal square. Maybe a4 just to chase it. I think I like that. Yeah, let's try it. If he plays a5, maybe a future queen b3 will keep their queen tethered to d8 because it needs to remain there defending the knight. h3 is also helpful in stopping bishop g4. This is a piece that black wouldn't mind trading because they have some congestion in their position. The d7 square, for instance, is a piece that could be utilized by several minor pieces, like both knights and the bishop. But whichever piece he puts there, it's inevitably going to be taking away opportunities from the other minor pieces in his camp. So I'm already pretty comfortable here. h6, letting me chase him with a5 if I want. I don't see the point of that move. Puts a pawn on an exposed square. Also with queen d2, I can gain a tempo. Maybe the idea is g5? I'm not sure about the wisdom of that, though. Maybe a5, knight d7, and then queen d2. And then if g5, play knight e1, looking to bring the knight to d3. Maybe knight e1 right away even, or queen d2 right away. Maybe I don't have to kick this knight. He'd probably rather I kick the knight. Because as of now, it's not doing anything on the b6 square. Yeah, let's play queen d2. And see if he's going to play king h7 or if he's going to go for g5. Plays king h7, so he's hesitant to play the g5 move. I could play e5 here. And after pawn takes, take on c5. But I kind of like the idea of moving this knight and then playing for f4 instead. So I think that's probably what I'll do. Do I play a5 first? a5, knight, b to d7, then knight e1. If knight e5, I'm ready to play f4 in that case. Let's say a5, knight, b to d7, knight e1, g5, knight d3. Yeah, that looks great for me. If knight e5 there, I could swap knights and take on c5. Okay, decision made. a5. Also, e5 again is coming to mind, now that I look at it. Trying to deflect a defender. But he can take with the pawn, and his knight remains defending. Okay, so we won't do that. Just start maneuvering this knight. Often the knight is bad on f3 in a Benoni-like structure. This resembles more of a Benoni than a King's Indian now, because black never played e5. So the knight on f3 blocks the f-pawn. So I might play f4 and then put the knight back on f3 or bring it to d3 and hope to achieve e5 with more support behind that pawn in the future. Knight g8, super defensive. If knight d3, then knight e5 trades a pair of pieces. I want to prevent trades because he's so cramped. So let's play f4. Control that e5 square before bringing this knight back out. Plays f5. Huh. Played it instantly. Aggressive. So if I take... Probably they're taking with the g-pawn. That creates a certain weakness on this diagonal, though. So maybe e takes f5, g takes f5, bishop d3. Target that pawn. And then I can play like my knight back to f3. Maybe a rook comes over to e1. He's got weaknesses. Yeah, I think I like taking on f5. Yeah, let's do it. And then the knight coming to d3 doesn't really make much sense anymore because there's no e5 to be pushed. So I think I'm comfortable bringing the knight back to f3 eventually and putting this piece on d3 to x-rays king. It just looks like I'm going to have easy play. Like knight f3, h4, the rook coming over to the center, like I said. There might be some question about this pawn. Might also be some question about whether he can play e6 and try to break up my position. Let's go here. g4 maybe some way down, sometime down the line might be good. Not right now, though. I want to save that move. Although, I don't know, maybe I could have considered it last move. It just seems better to get my knight out and connect my rooks again. If the king goes back to h8, it's very useful to have knight h4, hitting not only f5, but also the g6 square, threatening a fork on his king and rook. Difficult position for black. That f5 advance creates weaknesses. Queen e8. So probably trying to cover g6 and h5. Knight b5, trying to come into c7, maybe. If knight h4, queen h5, he defends f5 and hits my knight, so I can't do that. Rook ae1, while logical, is kind of bland, so I might avoid that move for now. So if knight h4, queen h5, I could just defend the knight, like bishop f2 or something, looking to play g4. Somehow I think this knight b5 move could be really awkward for him. Knight e4, though? Knight e4 could be played in reply. It gets messy. Queen c2. Attacking f5 is another option. Queen c2, queen h5. Bishop f2. Let's do that. So we're going to take aim at this f5 pawn. I'm not going to mess around with other plans. So on queen h5, as I'm anticipating, I think bishop f2, trying to go knight h4, and attack this pawn 3 times. It's just such an eyesore for black, and I have convenient ways I can attack it. This knight is hard for him to get into play. It's blocked by his other knight. Plays knight there. Wasn't anticipating that move. So if g4 is the knight coming into g3, it must be. It's pretty far behind enemy lines in that case, though. g4, knight g3. Let's say, I don't know, rook f2, king h8 maybe? Maybe king h2 is decent now, just to guard that g3 square. If bishop f2, he can take on f4, so that's why I don't want to play that one. Yeah, let's just play king h2. And if this knight comes to f6, then g4 is winning a piece. That knight is trapped on h5. If queen g6, g4 is also good. So king h2, idea of just pushing g4. That's all. Covering the g3 square. Takes on c3. Wow. All right, I could take with the queen and keep my structure together, but pawn takes. I mean, pawn takes seems like the better move. Yeah, let's do that. Keep our queen on the diagonal, leaning towards our king. B-file could be useful too. You never know. So he's given up his good dark square bishop. Knight back to g7, defending f5. So I guess he just wanted that square to work with. Makes sense. All right, I'm just going to play a centralizing move, I think. Or maybe bishop f2 to start. Yeah, let's start with bishop f2. Clear the e-file. I can bring my knight or bishop to h4, and they'll be defended. I guess black will be intending to play, well, I thought bishop d7, queen f7, but apparently not. Black is throwing no caution to the wind. So if I take on e5 and then take c5, he has e4 is the point. So probably take en passant is what I should do. Further open the position. So if I take en passant, he takes with the bishop. Rook fe1. Queen d7. If I take e6, he takes with the queen. There's not quite enough going on there, I don't think. Well, this looks awful for black, but I kind of see his point. I mean, maybe I can't like crush him right away in this position. So if I take en passant, he takes with the bishop. I don't like that that helps his development. That's my hang up about that move. So what if I take and then play bishop takes c5, e4, bishop takes f8, take d3, queen takes f8. That's very messy. I could also play f takes e5, d takes e5, rook ae1. He's going to play e4, however. Bishop takes e4, f takes e4, rook takes e4. Is queen g6 maybe? Okay, I'm going to go for this line. I'm just going to play bishop takes c5 and let him get two minor pieces for the rook, but I get these center pawns to work with. Material will be like roughly equal. I think I'll be up 1 point of material. Also on e4, I can play bishop takes e4 if I want. Maybe that's better. Bishop takes e4. That could just be better. Because then if queen takes... actually, I don't know. I take that back. Okay, let's just take here. I'm expecting that he'll take on d3. Does not. I can take here. And if he takes back, I have knight g5. Okay, so he needs to play queen d6 check now. And then we'll hide the king. Where to put the king? Let's go to h1. We'll trade.
Check.
With check. Bishop f5, maybe queen e5, I'm thinking. Look for a swap. Trade queens and try to use our extra pawns. Yeah, let's do that. If I had played like queen d4, I don't know, knight h5 trying to come into g3 looked kind of sketchy. I don't know. So I'm okay with going to an endgame, especially with the time situation. I have what? 3 pawns plus a rook against 2 minor pieces. So he avoids a trade. Knight d4 looks logical. Knight d4, rook e8, queen g3. Then if knight h5, queen f3, I think is good. Let's do that. Bishop takes h3, I can just take, I think. And if queen takes, queen back to h2 defends everything. So I'm thinking he'll probably play rook e8, queen g3, knight h5, queen f3. Yeah, we've got all our bases covered. 2 minutes remaining, 2-minute warning. He's got 4 times the amount of time we do. So time to hustle. Well, I give this guy credit. He definitely like changed the pace of the game at various points. Like he didn't sit around and like wait for me to slowly outplay him. He was taking it to me. Hmm. I think I'm just going to look for a trade. Swap the rooks off the board. Knight h5. Okay. Queen f3 probably. Keep an eye on this knight. Keep an eye on the the g3 square rather. He can't go to f8. My queen's covering that square. Let's pre-move this capture. Knight e6 looks really good now. Threatening knight f8. So he's got to cover that somehow. Probably putting a knight on f6. Probably this knight is better. Because if he uses this knight, then maybe just g4 is strong. Okay, so if knight here, maybe queen g3. Trying to bring the queen into e5. I'm liking the look of that. He can't take on c4 because of knight f8 once again. I want to uncover this rook to attack that knight, is the point. And the queen coming in e5 is looking powerful. So important thing is my c4 pawn is not really hanging right now. It's just an illusion. If knight h5, queen e5 renews the threat of knight f8. Okay, on that one I was thinking take even. So rook takes, bishop takes, knight f8 check. It kind of simplifies the position a little bit, though. Maybe queen e5 is just better. Yeah, let's just do that. If the knight comes back to f6, we take on f6, or if this knight comes in, same thing. Rook takes c4 is still not possible. Meanwhile, we're just threatening rook takes e4 and knight f8. So I don't see his defense. So knight f8.
Check.
Yeah, gotta go for it. He's got to take too. He's gonna take on c4, I bet. Now it's 3 minor pieces versus the rook. Weird position. I think I'm still doing a lot better, but it's messy now. Okay, we'll come here with the queen, keep everything defended. Let's play c4. Get the pawn up to c5 if possible. He has knight f5, but I'm going to go queen e5 in that case. This is messier than I would have liked. 40 seconds left. We're going to be blitzing. Oh, knight f5. I think queen f4 is decent. Let's do that. Cover the g3 square. Maybe I could have taken on a7 too. Hard to say. Maybe if this knight moves, I can play queen to b8, attacking this knight, and if that knight were to move, rook h8 could be possible. Queen g7, but that just allows this. That was a blunder by him.
Check.
Yeah, now I'm going to be able to get the queens off the board. King h8, queen e5. We'll just do this the simplest way, get the queens off. If knight f6, I can play rook f1, or I can even just play d6. Probably d6 is way easier. Yeah, we're not going to blow this position. d7 is a threat. And if queen takes d7, queen takes f6. If knight takes d7, we trade queens and then rook e7, winning the knight. If not for queen g7, he might have had a chance to resist there. I think it's probably always winning for white, but he could have confused the issue in time pressure. But now it's very simple. Okay, let's just take there. And then we'll play d7 next move.
Check. Check.
And we can just pre-move our way to victory, practically.
Check.
Go take this guy. For someone who's experienced in bullet, this is this is child's play. 20 seconds to win this position. So I wonder if he'll play it out or not. He'll probably go up and attack my rook with his king. Nope, guess not. Just going to get another queen. And he resigned. Okay, let's go back and have a look. So black obtained a pretty cramped position out of the opening. As I mentioned, I think knight c6 is a little bit of a mistake there. I've just never really trusted black's position after d5, but it is aligned. People play it. I've seen knight e5 before. Take, and then black will try to challenge white's center with e6. But here also white has a nice advantage. Instead, though, he played the knight back to b8. I castled. He went knight bd7, bishop e3, c5. I didn't see a good reason to take en passant, so just played h3. Useful move. Keeps any piece in the future out of g4. Plays knight b6. I thought that was pretty odd. I mean, it's hard for me to suggest a lot of good moves for black here because I think they've already done some damage to their position and their coordination, but knight b6 it looks artificial. The knight's not going anywhere, and especially after a4, the constant threat of a5 restricts like anything they can do. I mean, he might want to just play a5 himself to make sure he doesn't have to think about that in the future. And we've both weakened our squares on the b file, like my b4 square I've weakened, he's weakened his b5 square. But I can post a knight on b5 easily. He can't post a knight on b4 easily. Let me turn the engine on right about here. The engine loves white's position already. Thinks I have almost a decisive positional advantage. a5, knight back to d7. And I mentioned I wanted to improve this knight, play f4, and then bring the knight to f3 or d3 thereafter. That was the plan. Yeah, so now f4, and he went f5. Maybe not a bad try. mean, at least he's not sitting back and letting me slowly squeeze him to death with my pawns, my space advantage. So we got this trade. I played bishop d3. Knight here. Yeah, maybe I could have considered g4. I kind of just rolled it out. I was thinking like, oh, I have plenty of time to play g4 and exploit the pin if I want. But you never know. Maybe it was better to do it right now. So instead I played the knight to f3. Looks good. Queen e8. And then queen c2 targeting the f5 pawn. Knight h4 is also a suggestion of the engine. Trying to attack f5. Okay. Yeah. Not sure why I didn't do that right away. Because, as I mentioned, if knight h4, queen h5, I just have bishop f2 guarding this. And then g4 is going to be on the table once again. So I'm just trying to pressure f5 and coordinate my pieces in the best possible way. I can still improve my knight. I can still get this rook involved. So here he played knight h5. I went king h2, just guarding the g3 square and threatening g4. And then the surprising move, take on c3. I didn't predict these next two moves for black. Bishop takes c3. I took with the pawn. Queen takes was also possible. Or I guess the next three moves for black. Knight back to g7. And then especially e5. Okay, the engine hates this move for black, but over the board it might have been a decent chance, especially with me having under 6 minutes, getting closer to time pressure. Because it changes the character of the game. And when you notice the position trending away from you, trending in your opponent's favor, you have to try and find ways to change the character of the game. That's usually the better option than just sitting back and slowly losing. So I took on e5. The alternative was taking en passant, but after bishop takes, I don't know, he gets to play queen d7 or f7 next maybe, and then bring a rook over here. He might be solid. Now at this point, black has the better pawn structure in the long run. So I'd have to justify my play in some way, but f takes e5 seemed like the more straightforward way to do this. Yeah, and take on c5. And I figured even though he's getting the two minor pieces, I've got this massive pawns and open lines to work with, and their king is in question too. So here it would have been better to take with the bishop, huh? Why is that? So if pawn takes, bishop takes f8. Okay, and this pawn is pinned, so there's nothing going there. Queen takes f8 can't be played because of knight g5 winning the queen. Okay, so I actually escape without allowing them to win two minor pieces. Or maybe not. Knight f5, knight d4. If queen takes f8, queen takes e4 looks devastating with the pin. So instead, knight e3. Queen f2, knight takes
Check.
f1, rook takes f1. Okay. Yeah, and white's up two pawns in this position. Yeah, that's winning for me. So I think I missed a couple things there. But instead, after bishop takes f8, he played queen takes f8, which I thought was odd. I thought he would take on d3 first, gain a tempo on my queen. And I was ready to play this position, which does look better, but, you know, is messy still. But he took here, I took on e4, and it's nice that he can't take back because of knight g5 check with the discovered attack on the queen. But there is
Check.
queen d6. I went to h1. Maybe g1's better in view of future problems with the knight coming into g3. I was just trying to stay off of this diagonal, but I guess c5 is the only square they could access. So here, f takes, queen takes check, bishop f5, queen e5. I figured the endgame was better for me with the 3 extra pawns. Those pawns are kind of scattered, so it doesn't look like, it's not like a strong 3 extra pawns, but it does permeate the entire board. So he plays queen d7. I just went knight d4. This is harmless because I can just take. He gets one check in, but then queen h2, and he's running out of gas. So rook e8, queen back to g3. Rook a e1. Yeah, and I think white's like always winning this position. It's just a matter of beating the clock at this point. Being up, having 3 pawns and a rook is usually too much. A rook and 2 pawns versus 2 minor pieces is kind of close sometimes. I'd say that generally favors the rook, but 3 pawns is going to be too much most of the time, unless the minor pieces are super active. Queen g3. He cannot take on c4 because of knight f8. I think I misplayed this somewhere around here. So at this point, I could have played rook takes e4, bishop takes e4, and then a creeping move, queen g4. That's hard to see. The point of that is I'm threatening the bishop, and I'm also threatening knight g5 or knight f8. And I can win their queen because of discovery. Queen takes queen. So if they were to like save their bishop, this
Check.
is winning for me now. Rook takes f8, queen takes
Check.
d7 with check. Winning the game. But in time pressure, I just tried to play some logical-looking moves.
Check.
Here I went for knight f8. Rook f8 is apparently better. Leading with the rook. What am I threatening in that case? Rook f8, if knight takes c4, I guess I'm not threatening anything. Queen d4. If knight d6, take, queen takes. Oh, okay, so the queen is kind of overloaded, I guess, is the idea. It's trying to defend the rook and the g7 square. Yeah, and after take, he cannot take with the knight because of knight f8, checkmate.
Check.
Yeah, some of these things are a little hard to see with less than a minute. This is also crushing, although it didn't feel like plus 12 in the game. Queen e6 is good, looking for a trade. Yeah, I don't think it was ever slipping out of my grasp. Yeah, and then queen g7 makes it pretty easy, but if this knight had moved somewhere, like let's say here, I was thinking about queen b8. And if that knight moves, rook h8 is mate.
Check.
Yeah, an easy job from here.
Check. Check.
Okay, so yeah, black's opening play should not be repeated. I would not play this knight c6 move if I played the king's Indian. And also, yeah, I think his knight b6 idea was a little artificial, but then again, I didn't offer anything better. Not quite sure how he should play the position after this. Maybe b6, bishop b7. And hope to keep it closed for a while. I'm not sure I mind his play later, because, you know, f5, the computer is not, like, thrilled about it, although I guess it is the top move. And it does create some weaknesses in his position, but he's got to do something. He's got to try to fight back. Otherwise, I'm just going to be encroaching his position on all parts of the board. So I like the fact, from his point of view, that he changed the pace of the game at various points, like this decision to capture and then follow with e6. Like, trying to lock out my bishops, honestly, was what he's doing. And distract me from just pressurizing f5. So in that sense, he changed gears pretty well. It's just his position wasn't very good to begin with. So, hope you guys enjoyed this game. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.